For what you do not bring is not there. So it is that just recently I have had an unfoldment on something that makes me feel rather ashamed to admit, because I should have known it several hundred years ago. But I will admit to you that I have wondered for a great many years about this statement that love is the healer. I've wondered about that because I've known a lot of loving people who weren't healed. And I've wondered, what does this mean? And I don't only mean humanly loving people, but those who have caught a measure of spiritual love, impersonal love, universal love. And even with that, healings have not taken place. And so it is only very, very recently that the light dawned and realization came. Love is the healer, the love of God. To love God supremely, to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul. To love God so that it is not lip service, so that it is not a metaphysical cliche, so that it is actually a feeling within one. This is a healing agency. This really is a release or an overcoming of what the Master called this world. Love is a liberator, but love of money isn't, and love of position isn't, and love of one's family isn't. It's love of God. Oh, almost every mother on the face of the globe loves her family, and most fathers. But that isn't a healing agency. Many, many love their neighbors, but to love God is the secret, and it is the answer of the entire subject of love. And wherever love is mentioned, it really means love of God, or the love of neighbor, which is a love of God. In other words, to love one's neighbor purely from the standpoint that in loving my neighbor I am loving God, for those who say they love God, whom they have not seen, but do not love their fellow man whom they have seen, they are liars. Therefore, to be able to love our fellow man, not for his sake, but because in loving him we are loving God who constitutes his being, the being of man. God, who is the creative principle of man, the Father. So it is then that as we walk this path of the infinite way, you will find out how little you know of spiritual truth. Don't think I mean just you, for I'm always discovering how little I know. The spiritual truth is of such a nature and such a depth that it isn't given to any one of us to know but a grain of it at a time, and to have this grain reveal itself little by little, and usually with pains and problems. Not with successes. We are apt to sit back in those successes and lean back in them. The depth of our spiritual realization does not come in the years of our affluence and health, but in the years of our problems, the problems that force us out of our humanhood, force us to a place beyond the realm of the human mind. Yes, I can put it in these words. Everyone believes that they have some knowledge of God. And as long as they believe that, they have no knowledge of God. They are devoid of knowledge of God as long as there is a trace of belief that they have some knowledge of God. No one has even caught the first glimpse of God until they have reached that point in which they recognize that any bit of knowledge they ever had was wrong, and necessarily had to be wrong, because whatever their knowledge was represented only a concept that someone had passed on to them, or a concept they formed by reading something, an image in their own mind. In other words, any time we believe we understand God, it means we have an image of God that we have created. And so we've fallen in love with our own image, the image that we created. Not knowing sometimes we've created a monster, even when we call it God. You see, it is not possible with the human mind to know God. It is not possible to entertain a concept of God that is correct. We can know something of the nature of God, as when John says that God is love. That is not knowing God, remember. That is merely knowing the nature of God. In other words, when we say God is love, we are also saying that God does not create sin, or God does not create disease, or God never created death. When we say God is love, we are at the same time saying that God is not responsible for any of the ills that exist on the face of the earth. They are entirely man-made. This is not knowing God. This is merely knowing something of the nature of God. And we can know that because it is revealed to us. And it has been revealed to us through the mystics of all ages that God has never created a disease of any name or nature on the face of the globe. God has never been responsible for age. God has never caused death in the entire history of the world. God couldn't do those things and be love. Nor could God do those things and be life eternal. For in life eternal there can be no death or awareness of death or responsibility for death. And so it is that we can overcome many of the false concepts of God that we have entertained because of previous religious beliefs. But all of that does not yet bring us into a knowledge of God. And of course, it never is possible to have a knowledge of God, because that would mean that we are encompassing infinite God in a finite mind, or finite consciousness, or finite understanding. And that would be impossible. But we can, as we continue our studies and our meditations, we can rise to that place. And I have quoted this to you before of Maimonides, who said that if you say God is great, or God is love, or God is all, or God is infinite, you are saying no more than when you say God is. And so it is possible through study, through meditation, it is possible through catching glimpses, not of what's written in books, but what lies between the lines of what's written in books. It is possible to catch the vision at last. God is, and that is enough for me to know, and not try with the human mind to encompass God, but to relax in the assurance that God is.